Everybody?
Hi! I love you, Daria. I miss you.
All right. So, what was the Columbian Exchange? This will begin our lecture. So, let's begin. All right, so the Columbian Exchange, let me first give you a definition of what this is. The Columbian Exchange is, most basically, goods, foods like vegetables, fruits, animals, diseases that were exchanged between the Americas and Europe, Africa, and Asia. Okay? Exchange of goods, animals, diseases between Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas. When I refer to Europe, Africa, and Asia, you want to call these the Old World. This is going to be called the Old World several times in this lecture. So when you think of the Old World, Europe, Africa, Asia. When the New World is referred to in this time period, it is referring to the Americas, both North and South America, includes Central America too. North, South, just the Americas, the Caribbean, this whole area. It would be the New World. All right, so what happens is we see all these goods going back and forth, and you might want to put some examples for your test. Like, you might want to put the example that potatoes. Potatoes are something, my wife is from Peru. Peru is famous for having all kinds of varieties of potatoes. So potatoes, we got tomatoes, we got corn. None of these existed in anywhere in this part of the world over here. They were not there at all until the Europeans came to the Americas and then brought them back. So these products then came to Europe, and they diffused throughout Africa and Asia as well. Now, we have their fruits, like citrus fruits, grapes, bananas, sugarcane. They make the way from Europe or Africa and Asia, and they come all the way to the Americas and are brought in. And very interestingly is the animals. How many of the animals, like livestock, cattle, sheep, pigs, horses, those were all old world animals. They did not exist in the New World, but they came over on the ships, and the Europeans used them in the New World. So the Europeans brought many of their animals and used them in the New World. Many of the people in the Americas did as well, especially horses are one, for example, that many American Indians become very good riders, especially American Indians in the Dakota region, become very well known as very excellent horse riders. Before that, horses did not exist in the New World at all. And this one over here, diseases, smallpox, influenza, measles. Many of these diseases, the majority of them, originally came from these livestock animals. The Europeans, for example, got them slowly. Over hundreds of years, a disease like measles went through Europe. When the natives got them in the Americas, they got them right away and killed many of their numbers, especially smallpox. Especially smallpox. So this exchange is going back and forth. This is an international trade. An international trade that's going on. However, one group is really controlling this trade more than any other. The Europeans are the ones going back and forth in the boats controlling this trade. The Europeans are the ones going back and forth controlling this trade. And it benefits the Europeans far more than any group in it. In the Americas, there are some benefits for American Indians. There are some benefits for some groups. But the cost, what they lose, way outweighs that, especially when you consider smallpox and how much of the population dies from that disease. So the Europeans get a huge advantage in this trade and in this exchange, and because of that, they also become more powerful. And remember, this is going on the exact same time in history that the Portuguese are also sailing into Africa, going around Africa, and Europe's also going to Asia and getting a lot of goods. So it's becoming pretty clear why Europe is becoming a major, major world power They're having a lot of trade in Asia. Eventually they're going to conquer over in Asia. And they're also coming over here. They have diseases like smallpox that no one really understands what's going on. And much of the population of the natives is dying. And the Europeans are able to bring their products over here, grow them, make money off them. And they're also able to get new crops like tobacco, for example, make money off those. So they're benefiting on both sides. This is different than the Silk Road, and you'll want to write this down, it's important. This is different than the Silk Road. The Silk Road was a huge international trade route we talked about. But the Silk Road, we'll call it mutually beneficial. Mutually beneficial. Which means that in the Silk Road, if you were a Muslim trader in the Middle East and a Chinese trader all the way in China, and most everyone in between was benefiting from this trade. The Columbian Exchange is not everybody benefiting. The Europeans are overwhelmingly benefiting. The Americas will see some small benefits. Some foods will be added, some things will benefit them, but the losses far outweigh the benefits. Yes?
When you're talking about tobacco, was that originally from Europe? It was just big in America? Or?
No, it's originally from America, and it becomes a huge cash crop, which funds much of the founding of America, especially with Jamestown and the early colonies. And also becomes very much a crop that many slaves are used to grow as well. Tobacco, because of the growth of tobacco, growth of businesses, starts off America as a country, but also is very labor intensive and causes a lot of slaves to be brought in after many natives die and can't be used as slaves as well. Yes?
What about cotton?
Cotton will come later. Before you'll learn that later in American history next year. Before cotton comes in as a crop in the Americas, and I don't see, is cotton on here? Mm-hmm. Cotton's an old world crop, isn't it? Where do we see cotton? Is it old world or new world? Is it on here? It's not? Okay, but when cotton comes in, slavery is almost done in America before cotton comes. In fact, they're debating whether they should even have slavery anymore. And then cotton comes in, they're like, oh, wait a minute. We can make a lot of money from this, especially after the cotton gin was invented. Yes?
All right, so when all this is going on, is anyone from Asia trying to travel to America the other way?
There are, and there have been some expeditions by people in China. Your book mentions a couple of them. But however, what happens is that the Portuguese come to China, China makes a fatal mistake. They close their borders because they think their society is better than the other societies around them. They think the European merchants are beneath them. So they close their borders, which is a huge mistake for China. Because China basically, the one major mistake a country can make in world history is close your borders. And say, we have a great society, we're so good that we're not going to include other people. What will happen is you will fall behind. So China, which has been a world power for almost all of world history, in 1500 falls way behind Europe. And the biggest reason is because they close their borders. So let's continue and let's talk about Pangea real quick. Now, if we talk about the Columbian Exchange, there's one thing you have to understand is that at one time, all the continents were together. And that means we didn't have this division that we'll have before the Columbian Exchange where some animals are living on one side, some plants are living on the other side, because it was all one big continent with many animals. But this was 225 million years ago and there were no people. This was 225 million years ago and there were no people at this time. So this is Pangea. And what happens is over time we see the continents spread out. Now what will happen is some plants and animals will grow on these continents, and some will grow on these continents. So they'll go back and forth. Some will be, not back and forth, some will be only here, some will be only here. And what also happens, which is really interesting, some animals evolve differently. For example, the llama, and it's llama, not llama, the llama, you don't say tortillas, do you? You don't say quesadilla, do you? It's a llama. So, anyway, so the llama and the camel have a distant common ancestor. However, they evolved differently because the llama was growing up in the mountains of Peru, Ecuador, and the camel was in more of the deserts, low rainfall areas of northern Africa and Central Asia. So there are two animals that have the same relative if we go back far enough. So animals evolve differently. Another one is the rattlesnake. The rattlesnake is only in the Americas, especially mostly North America. It's a viper. It's a kind of a viper snake, but you only found in North America because it evolved differently. We're going to continue more of this tomorrow, where we'll continue our lecture.